So the Normington review, which was conducted about a decade or so ago, made some recommendations for reform of the Police Federation. And I think the independent review, this latest review, says this has been a patchy response. Some of them have been implemented, some of them partially.
Yeah.
There was a couple of proposals in particular that haven't been put in place. One is around financial transparency, about the various accounts that are held by the Federation and by branches should be out in the open. And the other one is about tenure, so that there's a limited period of time for officials and they can't just move around between roles and jobs. Are we going to see some action on those two?
Absolutely, is the response to the question you have just posed. But I think it's important to just take a step back a minute and just talk about the Normington review itself. I came into the Federation at the back of the Normington review recommendations to be implemented, and I came in as a consultant. So I have first-hand experience of what the recommendations are, having read the report and the review several times. I think it's important to recognize that that report has a number of inconsistencies in it. It feels, and it's always felt, like the government of the day wanted certain things out of the Federation and therefore commissioned the review. I mean, eventually the Federation did come under pressure and accept it as it's the independent review of the Federation. But the impetus for that came from the government of the day. So there's always been a certain level of suspicion about about what's behind those recommendations. In addition to that, the recommendations were contradicting and were inconsistent. So, for example, the recommendation would say we need to become a rankless organization. We should move away from rank structures and we are a rankless organization. But in the same breath, another recommendation would say the chair and the secretary of the local branch should be of a different rank.
Right.
That's one example. They would then say return subs back to the membership. Whilst it's a very noble way of thinking, at a practical level, how do we really return subs back to those very members who have contributed over years and then subsequently retired or moved on and so on. So there are some number of issues.
And obviously things have moved on since then. But on those specific proposals, which I think the independent review is saying, you need to take action.
Absolutely. So on the finances, more to come, for sure. What we have already done since the Normington review is that we have moved away from 44 independent annual audits to one independent annual audit. And we have appointed KPMG, who are a Big Four audit firm, who are now our independent external auditors. And the 2022 annual audit, I can tell you this today, is going to be published this month. The audit committee is meeting on Friday, followed by the board next week, and we will take it from there.
And are you able at national headquarters to see the number 2 accounts of, I don't know, West Yorkshire Police Federation or Lancashire Police Federation? Are you able to see those accounts, all those number 2 accounts?
Well, it's not as simple as that, Danny, which can I see the accounts or not. I refuse to accept for a minute that if I ask for the information, I will be refused to be given that information. If you see what I'm saying. What we need to be clear about is there is PFEW core and PFEW non-core. What I'm interested about is PFEW core, which is the membership paying subs into the Federation each month, and what are we doing with that subs? That's my interest. I am less concerned at this stage about the additional services that the branches offer to the membership and their families locally. And these are two different issues. So from my perspective, I'm the chief exec for PFEW. I'm not the chief exec for the additional services that the branches run themselves locally. And it's a very nuanced thing, but it's a very important distinction. So from a PFEW perspective, there is full transparency on where the money is going and how much money we are earning.
Okay.
And that is reflected in the annual report.
And while we're on financial transparency, is that going to include your pay and benefits as well? Are we going to be able to to see what you're earning, because I know that has been a bone of contention.
Absolutely.
When are we going to be able to see that?
We've always said that we've got to follow good practice in terms of how CEO salaries are published or executive salaries are published or board salaries are published, and that happens in the annual report. And
which is
it
published?
should be published in the annual report.
Which is when?
2022, my appointment was in 2023. So 2022 is due end of this month. And I believe the finance team are working towards publishing 2023 ASAP as soon as possible with KPMG.
In the next few months?
I would expect so. Yeah.
Right.
In the next few months.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
On tenure limits then,
Yes.
is that something that will be implemented or not, as Normington called for?
It's clearly the second time that's come up as a recommendation, and I think we need to have discussions as an organization. One thing that we did say, or I did say and commit to, is we will publish the findings in full and we will implement the recommendations of the review. The issue that we've had with tenure is people choose to join the federation not to necessarily make friends with police forces or their employers, but to support their colleagues who are also rank and file. And in the process of providing that support, influencing, negotiating, they do end up inadvertently upsetting relationships, because sometimes you've got to agree to disagree. Okay. And the issue that we have with tenure is, on one hand, they've compromised, or not compromised, rather they've put their future at stake by coming into the federation to support the membership, to influence and negotiate and protect their interest. And what we are now saying is, but after a certain period, you're going to go back and work to the force who you've been challenging on the other side. And that is a very difficult position to take. And we've got to respect, and I've got to respect, and the board have got to respect, which I know we all do, which is, it is not as simple as coming here on a secondment and going. And that's another important thing. When officers get elected into federation roles, Danny, they are not here on a secondment. That's a major misconception against a number of police forces. They are elected roles, which is a different treatment to a secondment role. And so it's not as simple as doing 3 years or 4 years and then going back because your project is coming to an end and your secondment is coming to an end. These are democratically elected roles. So whilst I accept the logic behind going back to the force with tenure, at a practical level, there are a number of issues we need to work through. It's not as straightforward as that. And I think it's easier for me to say this as a non-officer because I can be very objective about it. Okay. And so we need to work that through.
Okay. So I take that there's still quite a bit of work to do on both those fronts, financial transparency and tenure limits, before we see...
We have come a long way on finances.
Yeah.
We've never had one annual report, but we've had that for the last 2-3 years. Since the Normington review, we have done that. We are going to embark on that. Another important factor that I should tell you and the membership is we have also appointed an experienced CFO from
Chief Financial Officer.
Chief Financial Officer as an independent trustee to advise me and the board and the national trustees. So that is a further evidence of the importance we're giving to the world of finances, and we now have an independent trustee appointed who is going to provide that oversight, which hopefully will give the membership and the organization further reassurance.
We focus a lot on internal issues.
Yep.
We're going to take a couple of minutes to look externally at some of the big issues for the Federation and its members. Pay is obviously one of them. Police officers were given, I think, 7% the year before last, and then last year 4.75%. Obviously, you would want your members and officers to be given a fair award this coming year. But how are you going to achieve that with the current process, with the Police Remuneration Review Board, which isn't a negotiating sort of process? Is that something that you're working to change, or you Do you think you've just got to make your case and produce the evidence?
So there are two parallel work streams, if I can say so, that we are focusing on in relation to terms and conditions, including pay. At the outset, what I will say is we believe the peer review body is not independent. The government's appointed independent peer review body, the clues in the title, is not independent, is our firm belief.
Because the government sets the terms of reference in a sense, or
sets the terms of reference and then decides whether to accept the recommendations or not.
right. It's not binding.
It's like the independent review here of the Federation, where we are saying it's independent and we will implement the findings. And so we believe it is not independent. There are a number of other reasons. Ultimately, the Treasury will have a say in it, but the Treasury doesn't have a role in policing and so on and so forth. So we've set our stall out very clearly, and we said, until we get the confidence that there is sufficient independence, we are going to stay out of it. And that's a position the organization has taken.
It's a slightly odd position to play. It's like saying, well, we don't like the way this cup tournament's being run, so we're not going to be on the pitch. We're going to sort of just shout from the sidelines. Well, you're never going to get anything you want if you do that.
And you know what? Call it coincidence. The best pay awards we've had in recent policing history is when we've been out of the PRRB. The 7% pay award.
It may be coincidence. It may be that there was an election coming up.
It may be, absolutely. But some of the things that we have done in order to achieve that 7% is important to recognize. So we've commissioned a leading independent think tank to do an independent assessment on police pay and the pay degradation. We are not trying to be awkward about the peer review body. All we are saying is treat us fairly and with respect. And we don't believe that the government is treating us fairly and with respect when it comes to pay in terms and conditions.
So what would you want the process to look like?
We are asking for a fair and a binding pay arbitration. That's what we are asking.
What does it look like? What are the nuts and bolts of it?
What it means is a negotiation framework, like the Scotland have, police Scotland have, like what we had about a decade ago, until Theresa May came into.
What is the Labour government said to you about that? Have you had any meetings or discussions where you've put forward that idea?
We have had. So what we've done is we have engaged the membership. We've had over 50,000 members respond for the first time ever on a PFAW survey or a poll. And the mandate is very clear. They have asked us to negotiate a fair and a binding pay arbitration. We have made that very clear to the government that if we are unable to achieve that, then our hands as a membership body will be forced to go back to the membership again to seek their views on the right to strike action. None of us, I don't believe, want it, but if we don't resolve a better pay mechanism, I think we have some serious problems there.
How are you going to persuade the government to give you the right to take strike action? That's not going to happen, is it?
We don't, and that's not what we want.
But it won't happen, though. No government's going to
I agree
give the
with
police
that. I agree with that. But the important bit is the strength of feeling of the membership. The strength of feeling of being treated unfairly and inconsistently, I think, is the point of principle here, which is we suffer in excess of about 20-23% pay degradation. Over the pay has eroded for policing. And again, as a non-officer, I can say this unemotionally. You know, policing pay has eroded over decades, and that is an issue. The risk to lives of police officers is far greater than the risk to life of any other frontline service. We argue that, and we prove that, and we have the evidence for that. So it does not make sense when your starting salary or the salaries that you have for the rank and file is under compared to other frontline services. And the rate of increase the other frontline services have, maybe because they have the right to strike and we don't have. The vast majority of the frontline services, not all of them. Okay? So it's the strength of feeling. The mood music within the government seems to have changed. So long as they were in the opposition, you know, they expressed a lot of support for the work we as a federation have been doing, are keen to do, want to do, and they wanted to hear the voice of the rank and file, the views of the rank and file. But believe it or not, since then taking post or coming into government rather on the 4th of July, it's taken 140 days for us to even get a meeting with the policing minister.
Why do you think the mood music has changed?
Why I think is this, because to me it feels like there are some in the government and the Home Office who seem to be getting more carried away with what's happening on social media rather than having conversations directly with us. We have two jobs as a federation. One, we've got to get our act together and we've got to rebuild, which we agree we've got things wrong and we are working at pace and at the right pace to do it. But on the other hand, we also have a job to represent the membership. Using our internal transformation and the noise that the vocal minority are causing is not a good enough excuse not to meet us when we have important things to talk about. And I think some officials in the government and the Home Office are chasing shadows by following what's happening on social media.
One thing that the government has committed to do is to modernise and reform the vetting rules for police officers. But the Police Federation is considering a legal challenge against some of these changes.
Yeah.
College of Policing. Can you explain your position on that? Because I think most members of the public would feel that the vetting rules do need to be stricter, given the recent slew of scandals that we've seen in policing over the past few years.
100%. We are all for tightening things. We are all for weeding out poor behavior and those people who frankly don't deserve to wear a uniform. Okay, we are all for that. Without going into too much detail on this issue, because this is an area which is led by the Secretary's office again, because that's all part of the terms and conditions. What I will say is this: whilst in principle we do agree things need to change, what we are asking for is a fair dismissal process or a fair process for vetting. I believe that the guidance that the College of Policing have produced is unfair when it's applying sanctions or removal of the officers. What we are asking for is an independent appeals process and for the changes to be regulated in law.
Right.
So we are not pushing against it, contrary to popular misinformation out there. What we are saying is we are asking for it to be regulated and we are asking for an independence in that process.
But if a police officer fails their vetting, they surely can't be a police officer anymore. It's black and white, isn't it?
But I do think people deserve to know why they failed the vetting.
And you, under the new guidance, you're saying you're a police officer, you failed your vetting, and then you're out. You're not told why?
And I believe so. I have to be honest here, which is that's an area that's the Secretary's office lead on. But what I will go back to is that we don't believe that the College of Policing guidance has that independent process built into it.
And that's the key for you. It's that independent appeals process.
Independence appeals process is the key bit is one of the key bits for us, because that is where we think it will be unbiased and it will be fair.
And if it comes down to the Federation having to take legal action to bring about a change to the College of Policing guidance, will it fund that legal action?
We've got to. The membership have told us, be us our true voice, truly represent us. That's one of the 5-6 themes I've called out. You know, that's coming back from. If at all the review is saying anything, the review is calling that out, which is the organization needs to be a true representative body. And if we feel, and there is evidence of our membership being compromised as a result of changes, we've got to. I mean, we are all for engaging without the legal proceedings and wanting to sit around the table and have a conversation. But the government need to play their part. They've got to play their part. It can't be another 140 days or another 40 days before we can get another meeting.
Yeah. Finally, Mukund, I just want to ask about you and your role
Yeah.
as Chief Executive Officer. This is a pretty tough job. I know you worked here before as Chief Operating Officer, but you've come in for quite a lot of criticism and frankly, and abuse on social media in particular, and a petition calling for a no confidence vote in you. I think 6,000 people have signed it, something like that. How are you bearing up?
Thank you. Danny, I think there's a bit of I do need to clarify one thing, because the process of my appointment from a COO to CEO, I think has taken various forms of gossip and rumors, and 2 and 2 has become 100. At a time when, as an organization, we've been going through one of our lowest points at the back of the employment tribunal judgment and other litigious landscape that we are involved in. As a consummate professional, I had a choice. Either I decide to pursue my career outside of PFEW, or I step up. And what good leaders do is step up. So I asked the board for the opportunity. So the reason why the process wasn't run is for 2 reasons. One, we were time bound. In an existential crisis, we are not going to be able to run a process of 4 weeks of applications and 4 weeks of interviews and 6 weeks waiting for people to join. Because you can see the scale of change and the intensity that we're having to deal with. And so I asked for the opportunity to lead. And the board reflected on the feedback the membership have given. And credit to them that they've taken this bold decision to say, yes, we've got to play to our strengths. As elected officers, they need to be representing the views of the membership on policing policy, not running a £40 million business. So this model that we've now got to is where officers and professionals work together in the wider interest of the membership. So we play to our strengths. I run the business and the £40 million money coming in and where the money is going out, and ensure we are financially resilient and we have the right decision-making structures, frameworks and governance in place. And the elected officers represent the membership on terms and conditions and other policing policies. And that's what we have to do to benefit from membership. So since my appointment, and I just want to clarify how I got from a COO to the CEO.
Yeah.
And I felt it's important, because there isn't anything that's rigged in the background here as people.
Well, you've made that very clear, but the past 18 months have not been easy for you.
It hasn't been easy.
A lot of personal abuse directed at you, which is very unpleasant and offensive.
It has. And then thanks for asking that. I think there are, firstly, what I've always said, and I continue to take a stance on, is I refuse to do business on social media. Okay, no matter what people want to put on social media, which I can categorically say is disinformation, okay, and misinformation. And I firmly believe there are some of them who are crossing the line towards causing disaffection against the Federation, which is a serious issue. Okay? I will not do business on social media. But what I've always said is, my door's open if people want to come and speak to us.